I want to bring in Neama Rahmani. He is a former federal prosecutor and the president and co-founder of West Coast Trial Lawyers. We reached him tonight in Los Angeles. Okay, so let's talk about that news conference. What did you make of what the family members had to say today?
Travis, we heard a lot from the family about justice, but not necessarily the law. And I think they know that the law doesn't support the Menendez brothers because they're arguing self-defense. And that's a very difficult argument to make if you shoot your parents in the back of the head while they're watching TV and eating ice cream, because self-defense under California law requires an imminent threat of death or serious bodily injury. And of course, one of the brothers had moved out, one was about to move out. But they talked about the sex abuse that they suffered and justice. And the just result here, I agree with the family members, is for the brothers to be released. That's why we saw that focus on the abuse that they suffered, the fact that they've served 35 years, everything they've accomplished in prison. One of the brothers even got his degree.
Can a Netflix documentary, can a Netflix series, dramatic series, make this much of a difference? I guess it can change public opinion, but could that potentially influence the judge?
Absolutely, Travis. A Netflix series or any documentary can affect a legal case, and we've seen it time and time again. Britney Spears was in a conservatorship for more than a decade before there was a documentary. R. Kelly had never faced criminal justice. There was one trial, he was acquitted until surviving R. Kelly. And even Bob Durst, who was involved in multiple murders over the span of 30 years, finally received justice after the HBO documentary, The Jinx. So we know that a Netflix series, Monsters in this case, can have a dramatic effect on both traditional and social media. And of course, George Gascon, the district attorney here in Los Angeles, is involved in a highly contested election, and the Menendez brothers makes for very good politics.
Interesting. There's always an element of politics, it seems like. Okay, let's talk about this new evidence and what we know about it.
So there's two pieces of evidence that Mark Garagos raised, and frankly, sounds like the district attorney's office has had this evidence for more than 1 year. So the question is, why is he deciding this in the next 10 days? And why is he also deciding, apparently, the Marilyn Manson allegations also shortly before an election? But, you know, when it comes to the two pieces of evidence, they corroborate the allegations that Eric and Lyle were sexually abused. Obviously, if Jose abused someone else, and that's Roy Rosello, a member of the boy band Menudo, and if Eric wrote a letter to his cousin 8 months before the murders documenting the abuse, that all supports the fact that the brothers were indeed abused. Now, the question is, if they believe that their father would kill them if he outed them, if they outed him as an abuser, is that enough for self-defense? And even if it is enough for self-defense with respect to Jose, how does that necessarily apply to their mom, Kitty? Now, I understand the argument that she was complicit and she groomed them. But again, the brothers' argument doesn't squarely fit within the four corners of self-defense law, which makes the legal argument a lot more challenging than the justice one.
Well, and that's what I was going to ask you about the mother as well. But tell me kind of how the justice system in the United States has shifted in the years since this murder.
Well, we're talking about a very different time. Obviously, I grew up in Southern California, and I remember this case in the late 80s and early 90s. And there wasn't much discussion of boys being sexually abused, especially at the hands of their father. Obviously, there's much more awareness right now. Obviously, it was a very different time. California had the death penalty, still does, but there's been a moratorium. We haven't had execution in many years. Let's not forget, there was the possibility that the brothers would have been sentenced to death. Now, the jury spared their lives, but they're still facing life without the possibility of parole. That's the challenge that we have here. If you engage in premeditated first-degree murder, that's a sentence. The judge doesn't have any discretion to go any lower. Now, obviously, the district attorney can come and say that the sentence is unjust and recommend a resentencing, which I'm sure the family members who spoke today would agree to. They have a right to speak under Marcy's law. And if so, the question is, just like Steve said, is the judge going to rubber stamp that recommendation? And I think that they will.
Okay, we will see what happens, and we'll have you back. Neama, appreciate it. That is Neama Rahmani, a former federal prosecutor and the president and co-founder of West Coast Trial Lawyers. He joins us from Los Angeles.